Okay, welcome everyone. As we welcome in Mark Frankel, Marshall Castle, Irving Fishbaum, Nachman Chapler, who seems to be at a wedding, Aaron Swade, Mel Zachter, Ben Zion Cohn, Shimon Klein,
My great Bava Metzia.
by the Bava Mitzvah, Yitz Fuchs, Yitzi Muller, Moshe Lehman, Shimon Deer, Rabbi Kranz, and we welcome here in Shul Saba and Reb Kramer and Michal Avram, Ruvain Shanet, Reb Avram Rezepkovitz, as we are holding on Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph in Masechtas Bava Metzia. Berish Gesseman is here as well, and Berish, it's always good to have you, thank you. We are holding on Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph by Gufa. Gufa, 4 lines from the top of Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Gufa, Ra Osan Rotzin Achar HaMetzia. You see people running after a lost article. Amar Reb Yirmiyah, Amar Reb Yochanan, we said that you could say that your courtyard should acquire it for you. V'hu sheratz achreim, when you are able to run after it, umagion, and overtake it. So, Uboy Rabbi Yirmiyah b'matana heich. What about a gift? Because by a gift, it's das acheres makna oisa. It's somebody is giving it to you, so the acquisition is easier because it's being propelled to you by someone else. So there, Kibla Minei Rav Abba Bar Kahana, Rav Abba Bar Kahana accepted Afal Pisha Ratzachreim, even if you run afterwards the Aimagian and you wouldn't overtake it, because we said that when it comes to Das Acheres Makna Isa, your Chotzer could acquire it for you, even if it's not a Chotzer Amishtameres. Now, Boy Rava. Now, if you remember, for those that are with us in the Chak, we actually, in Mesechtas Para, we actually talked about this concept. This concept is a Machlokes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbanan in Mesechtas Shabbos. And that is, we know that you're chayiv when you take something from the Rishus Harabim and bring it into the Rishus HaYachid. That means if there's a akira in the Rishus Harabim and a hanacha in the Rishus HaYachid, you're chayiv. If I throw a pixie, a small football, from the Rishus Harabim, it passes through a Rishus HaYachid and then flies out, are you going to be chayiv? So you'll say, why should you be chayiv? You didn't make a hanacha in the Rishus HaYachid. So Rabbi Akiva holds kluta kamisho and chadamia, that if it's intercepted by the airspace, it's as if it landed there. Now here the Gemara poses this question in Masechtas Parah. We learned it about the interior of a earthenware vessel, but here the Gemara says an interesting thing. By Rava, Zorak Arniki bepesach zeh, if somebody threw a purse and it flew into one door of my house, v'yotza bepesach achar, and flew out the other door. You know, people tell me that they listen to my shir and it goes in one ear and out the other ear. Right? I know Marshall, that's why I told you to wear headphones. But my is, you know, it's funny. Michal Avram is laughing, but there's a pasuk, Laman tisaper be'oznei bincha uben bincha leimar, to speak in the ears of your son and your grandchildren. And the question is, why does it have to say ears? Where do you think you're going to speak to their nose? You know, every word in the Torah is meaningful. So why does it have to say Laman tisaper be'oznei bincha? What do you think? You should talk to the toes of your son? Obviously you're going to talk to the ears. Right? So one teretz is that you should make sure that it gets into their ears. there are a lot of parents that say, I did my job. I told them the right way. I did mine. So the Torah says you only did yours if it got into the ear. If it went in one ear and out the other ear, you didn't do your job. Or it never got in. There's another lesson in the pasuk, just to show you that there's nothing superfluous in the Torah. When it says "Ulaman tisaper ba'oznei bincha," it's telling you that it's not enough group chinuch at the Shabbos table. There are parents that say, I always educate my children. I talk to them by the dinner table. The pasuk says it's not enough. You need to speak to each child individually. L'man tisaper ba'oznei bincha. Every child connects in a different way. There's a child that handles very good rewards. There's another child that does good when you build them up. And there's another child that you have to yell at. You have to know each child is different. Chanoich l'nar al pi darkai. Right? With Marshall, it's a big book. 1,000 pages to know how to talk to him. It's a big book.
Yeah. Riff. Give me all you got.
Yeah, right. Right. It's a complicated thing. But anyway,
with those headphones, it echoes inside my head like that.
But anyway, boy Rava, Zarek Arniki bepesach zeh. If I throw a purse into Marshall's front door, v'yotza bepesach acher, and it goes out the back door, Mao. Do we say that avir she'ein soifei lanuach? Do we say that airspace where it's never going to come to rest still kamunach dami? Because we'll say like Rabbi Akiva that kluta kamisha hunchadamya, that if it's intercepted in the airspace, it's as if it temporarily came to a rest. Oiloi, or not. Amalei Rav Papa l'Rava, so Rav Papa said to Rava, V'imre lo Ravada bar Masna l'Rava. V'imre lo Ravina l'Rava, 3 different versions. Lav hainu masnisen. Isn't that the case of our Mishnah? Rois and Ross and Achar Metzia, if you see them running after a lost article. V'amar Rav Yirmi, Amar Rav Yechon, v'usha rotz achreyan, umagian. That's only if you overtake it. U'boy Rav Yirmi b'matana haich. What about a gift? V'kiblu minei Rav Abba bar Kahana b'matana, afal pisha rotz achreyan v'ein magian. Even if you run after it and you don't overtake it. Now, if you didn't overtake it, so then it passed through your courtyard because it was not mishtameres, and we say that even though it passed through, it went in and went out, you acquire it. Says the Gemara, no, there it touched the floor. There it's talking about the animal entered your courtyard and rolled on the floor or ran through the floor. Amalei misgalgel kamer, you're talking about when it's rolling. Shani misgalgel, that since it was on the floor, that's more the munach dummy. That's as if it came to rest because it came to contact with the floor of your courtyard. But over here, where it flew in the air, maybe we don't say that. So the Gemara does not come to a conclusion on this question of kluta kamisha and chadamia. New Mishnah, first Mishnah of the day.
Shelley missed your introduction, but he's wearing headphones. That's amazing.
It's amazing. He's a real Talmud. Here's what his Rebbe says even before he says it.
What are we talking about?
I didn't acknowledge over here our dedicators, and that's Michal Avram, who's dedicating this Masechta, La'agdil Teiro La'adira, and A.B. Spry, who's dedicating the Masechta for all his children to become Babbas. He's dedicating the Babbas. That's the most unique dedication that I ever got. And you see, by the way, you see that Yitzi Fuchs is trying to show that he's a grasshopper amongst the leaves. Looks like Mamash an Edelab grasshopper. Now,
Hey, it looks like an aphid.
Even that, either that or Peter Pan. Now, Mitzias Benoi Ubitoi Haketanim. The lost articles found by your minor sons and daughters. Or Mitzias Avdoi Vishivchosai Hakananim. Or the lost articles found by your male or female Canaanite servants. Or Metziras Ishtoi, or the Metzia of your wife, Harielu Shaloi, is yours. Because your children, you're Zoichet to the Metzias of your children, you're Zoichet to the Metzias of Kol Mashakona Evid Kona Rabbi, Kol Mashakona Shivcha Kona Rabbi by Kanani, and Kol Isha Kona Baila. So that's all simple. But if you have an Evid Ivri, or an Amma Ivriya, Metzias Avdoi V'Shivchosoi Ivrim, or Metzias Ishtoi Shigirsha, it's not your wife anymore, Loyaleinu, Afal Pi Shaloi Nasan Ksuva, even though he didn't give her yet the Ksuva and he's still supporting her, the din is Harielu Shalohen, they get to keep it. Now a child is not so simple. Why is it that what a cotton picks up, why does it belong to the father? It's not so simple why that is. Amar Shmuel mipnei ma amru metzias katan la'aviv. You know why? Shebisha shemoitza. As soon as he finds it, he runs over and gives it to his father. So that shows that he has a das to pick it up for his parent. Shebisha shemoitza maritza eitzel aviv. He brings it up, Daddy, look what I found. He doesn't keep it in his hand. So the Gemara wants to say that we see from over here that a child doesn't acquire something biblically for himself. Lememra de Shmuel cotton lesle schia lenafshe midaraisa. He doesn't have the ability to acquire something for himself, since a cotton doesn't have das. So a cotton doesn't have an ability to acquire something from himself biblically. Now, before we learn the next Gemara, I want to give you a little bit of a preface. If Marshall is working for me, the din is that, let's say, Chatzkel owns a field, but he's a poor man. He's not allowed to keep the matnes aniyim from his own field. He's not allowed to do that. That's a halacha. That even if you're poor, from your own field you can't take the paya, you can't take the leket. Leket is when you're reaping, if one or two blades fall on the ground, you got to leave it there. 3, you could pick it up. But if 1 or 2 fall on the ground, you got to leave it there. It's called leket. It belongs to the ani. Even if the owner of the field is an ani, he can't take his own leket. He has to leave it for other poor people. Now, if Marshall is poor and he's working in my field, he could take the leket, because it's not his field. He's working in my field, but it's not his field, so he could take it. But if he's a sharecropper, as a sharecropper, he has a portion of the land, and then he cannot take the leket, because he's not allowed to take it since he has a portion of the land. Now, the Gemara is going to make this more complicated. If Marshall has his son walking behind him. Now, what's the din there? So let's see it inside. Vatanya, hasoicher es hapoyel. If I hire Marshall to work for me, yelaket b'noi acharav. His son could collect the leket that falls when Marshall is working. But lamachza l'shlish u'l'raviyah, If Marshall is working for a percentage, so he owns a part of the land, then lo yilakeh b'nai acharav. Now that fits in very consistent with what we said, that the child picks up for his father. So if Marshall is working, he could take the leken himself. He's not the owner of the field, so then the child could take it also for his father. If Marshall is a sharecropper, so he has a percentage of the land, he cannot take, and since he cannot take, and the child is taking for him, so the child cannot take it either. Comes along Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, Rabbi Yossi says, "Ben kach or ben kach yelaket b'noi v'ishto yachrav." In either case, his son or his wife could take after him. And whoa, v'amar Shmuel halacha k'Rabbi Yossi. And Shmuel says the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. But I amrit b'shleima, if you'll hold that cotton islay zechiyah, that the child could acquire lenafshei. So that's why even though the father has a percentage of the land, but the child is taking it for himself, so he could take it. Kika malakit, lenafshei kamalakit. And then the father is taking it from the child. Vavu aminei kazachi. Eli amrit cotton leslay zechiyah lenafshei. So then kika malakit la'aviv kamalakit. Then when he's picking it up for his father. And we said if his father, since he has a percentage of the land, the father is like a wealthy person. He's not a wealthy person, but since he owns a part of the land, we said the one that owns the land is not allowed to take the matnas aniyim. Says the Gemara, so then amay ishto yubanav malaket achrav. Says the Gemara, you're right. Shmuel taima detana didan kamer. Shmuel was just saying the reason of the Tan of our Mishnah. But V'lei lo Yisraelei, he taka holds that a cotton could be Zoicha for himself. Says the Gemara, can that be? As we welcome in Gedalia, we're issuing a major protest. We miss you down here. Does that help, issuing a protest? It does?
He gets Harris cream. He's a soft guy.
Look at that, he's coming, he's getting up and he's coming. Look at that, unbelievable.
I'm not home.
You're not home?
No, I'm babysitting my grandchildren.
It looks like you're in a toy store.
I'll tell my
Kids
son.
are gone.
Looks like he's, I thought he was in, you remember Linux?
Yeah.
It looks like you're in Linux. Linux was a toy store on 13th Avenue. But anyway, my father, Olav Shalom, used to go into Linux every Friday and buy us the new Hardy Boy book. Never forget, he had certain things. He would come home with a new Hardy Boy book every year. You know, I'm going back 55 years ago. But
Just the other day. It explains a lot about you, actually.
yeah.
Adventurer.
But
Actually, certainly.
if you, I read every single word written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Every single word. All 52 short stories and all 4 novels. But anyway, that was more than the Hardy Boys. But I also read every Alistair MacLean. But anyway, that's also, we're talking about a long time ago. So now, V'shavar Rabbi Yossi asks the Gemara, does Rabbi Yossi hold that cotton islay zechiyah midaraisa, that a child could acquire something biblically? V'tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, mitzias cheresh shaita v'cotton, the find of a deaf mute, an imbecile or of a minor, yesh behem mishum gezel mipnei darkei shalom. You can't take it away from them, not because they have a kinyan. They don't have a kinyan. It's only because to maintain the peace. Rabbi Yossi Omer gezel gomer. No, it's real theft. And even Rav Chisda says, even according to Rabbi Yossi, it's not real theft, because somebody that's not a bar das cannot make a kinyan. Rav Chisda gezel gomer midivrayim. It's only gezel midrabanan. So what's the difference between gezel midrabanan and gezel because of darkei shalom? They're both drabanan. One is to maintain the peace, and one is gezel gomer midrabanan. What's the difference? Nafkamina loitzia b'dayonim. That means that if a child picks it up, and then, let's see, we need a bully, a marshal takes it away from the child, so if you hold it's gezel gomer midrabanan, then we take it away from marshal. If it's only to maintain the peace, we won't take it away from marshal. El Amar, so you see that Rabbi Yossi says it's only the Rabbanan, so he doesn't have Zechiyah Midoraisa, because if it were Zechiyah biblically, then it wouldn't be only the Rabbanan. Ella Amar Abaya, listen to this svara. Rabbi Yossi holds that the child acquires it because when a poor person sees Marshall walking with his child behind him, the poor people give up on ever getting stuff in this field, because they know that the child is like a human vacuum cleaner right behind the father. And therefore, that's why the child acquires it, because everybody, the aniyim, relinquish their rights. Now this is a Mishnah in Peah. We learned it when we learned the Mishnah Yomis, we learned it in the Chak. The din is, when could rich people come into a field and take the leftovers in the field? Once the stragglers, the Gemara says, the Mefarshim say Nemushas, are once the old paupers already went through the field, then people assume there's nothing left. And therefore, the poor people give up hope of anything, and even wealthy people could take. If a child is scooping up right behind the worker, they give up on it. They give up hope of having anything left. And therefore, maske daitayu. They give up, they put their mind off this field. Savre brei dahaich, the son of the worker, malaktile, is going to collect it right away, and therefore the poor people give it up. Says the Gemara, but are you allowed to latchatchila do something to scare away the poor from the field? I mean, here we're allowing the child to go in the back of the father, but if that's scaring away the people that are really entitled to get the stuff in the field, are you allowed to put a lion in the field to stop people from getting what's duly theirs? Is a person allowed to crouch a lion in the field that the poor people should see and run away? Are you allowed to do this? Have a child go behind the father in order to scare away the aniyim, that they should give up hope, and then he's allowed to legally take it? Rava comes up with a new idea. This is a really innovative idea. Even though the child doesn't have schia, they gave him schia because aniyim are pleased to allow this, so that they too could go in with their children. Asu she'ena zoicha kezaicha. Why? Because my time aniyim gurfayu neichalu, the aniyim are pleased to accept that the children should be able to collect behind their parents. So that when they're hired to work a field, they could go with their children behind them. Nilketuba nayu basrayu. Says the Gemara, but this interpretation of the Mishnah is in direct opposition of Rab Chia bar Abba. Rab Chia bar Abba has a different interpretation of our Mishnah. Pliga de Rab Chia bar Abba. This is in opposition to the position of Rab Chia bar Abba. Dam Rab Chia bar Abba, Am Rab Yochanan, when our Mishnah is talking about cotton and gadol, loy gadol mamish. When it says gadol, it doesn't mean an actual adult. V'loy cotton mamish. And when it says cotton, it doesn't mean a minor. What it depends upon is whether the person is being supported by his father, whether he's getting room and board from his father. El gadol v'samach al shulchan aviv. If he's an adult, but he's being supported by the father, since he's being supported by the father gets the articles that he finds. Zel cotton. Cotton ve'ena samach al shulchan aviv, but if he's not being supported by his father, zel gadol, who gets to keep it on his own. Now, Metzias avdoi v'shivchasoi ha'ivrim, the lost articles of an Eved or an Amma of Riyah, now that they're not owned by the master. Hariyu shalatzman. But one second. Didn't we learn that if Marshall works for me in general, I get to keep his lost articles because we said his hand is an extension of mine? Am I? Why is the Eved Ivri allowed to keep the lost article? He's my Eved Ivri. Amai lo yehei elapayel. He shouldn't be any worse or any better in this case. No. He shouldn't be any better than Marshall working for me. When Marshall finds something, gets keep to himself, but that's only if I delineated that he's just hoeing or weeding. Where I told him, weed for me today, or or hoe for me today. But if I told him, you're hired to work for me today, we said that what he finds is mine. So over here, my Eved Ivri has to do all kinds of work for me. So why does he get to keep the lost article? That's a very strong kasha. Here we're talking about where the Eved has a very highly skilled job. And the highly skilled job is to pierce pearls, to string pearls. It's a highly skilled job to pierce the pearls and string them. So there, the Adon handed over the Eved that all he wants him to do is this. And therefore, anything else, the Eved is working for himself. And therefore, if he finds a lost article, he gets to keep the lost article. Rava says, no, here we're talking about where the Eved could multitask. He could do what he's supposed to do and at the same time pick up the lost article. With one hand, he's turning the mill, and the other hand, he picks up the wallet. So there, it belongs to him. The Bava Metzia Daf. It's talking about where he could multitask. Rav Papa changes the whole rule of what we learned earlier. When we said that Marshall working for me, he has to turn over the lost article to me. That's only where his work was to find for me lost things. So it's normally a worker doesn't have to give over the wallet. Somebody is not muted. Okay, we found out who it is. We're pretty low on people tonight. Only 23 people. What's going on tonight? We're missing a tremendous amount of people tonight.
A good hockey game on somewhere.
No, we don't have such people. We're missing AB. We're missing a lot of people tonight. Rav Papa says that where do we say that Marshall has to turn over that's only if I hired him to find lost things. Now, what would be such a case? The case would be is I tell Marshall there's a river that overflowed and fish and all kinds of things are all over the beach. Go and retrieve it. What happened is the marsh got overflowed with fish. The water overflowed, and there's fish and all kinds of things, bottles with messages in it, that are antiques. And I tell Marshall to go and pick it up, but only over there. Stamazai, an Eved that's an Ivri, if he finds something, it belongs to him. Now here we're going to run into another very interesting problem. It says that by the Shivcha, her lost article, that's an Amma of Riyah, her lost article belongs to her. So that doesn't make sense. How could it belong to her? And right away the Gemara asks, Hi Shivcha Heichi Dami. This Shivcha, what's it talking about? Ida Aisi Shtei Saras, if she reached puberty, then she's freed. She's not a Shivcha. Shivcha goes free at puberty. Ida Aisi Shtei Saras, my boy's Gabe. What's she doing in servitude? The Ida Loy Aisi Shtei Saras, and if she didn't have 2 ears, she didn't reach puberty, so if she finds something, it should go to the father. It should go to the father. Now, if her father died frees her also. And if she doesn't have a father, tapik memisas av, she should go free from the servitude with the death of the father. Damarei shlokish amma avriya kana atzma bemisas av. An amma avriya wins her freedom with the death of her father, mirishusa adan, from the domain of her master, mikal v'chaymer. Now that's a kal v'chaymer that we learned about in Masechtas Kedushin. The kal v'chaymer goes as follows: Madach, a girl who doesn't go out of the father's rishus. A normal girl is in her father's rishus until Boigris, because it says Binu Reha, when she's a maiden, from 12 years and 1 day to 12 and a half and 1 day, Beis Aviyah. But she goes free if her father dies. Then she's not inherited by the Yoshim. Everything is hers. Her brothers don't get it. Then an Amma of Riyah that does go free with puberty should definitely go free when the father dies. Says the Gemara, V'lavi Toisav Reish Lakish. Didn't Reish Lakish in Masechtas Kedushin refute that Kal V'chaymer? So the Gemara says, well, Neima Meha Nami Tavi Tiyufta. Let's say that the refutation is also clear from over here, because over here you see obviously that it says that if she finds something, it goes to her, and it doesn't go to the father. Okay? It doesn't go to the father, so it must be talking about where the father's dead, and even though the father's dead, we see that she's still in servitude. Says Merloi. Va'ilam di Yisei. The father's alive. I said, and when she finds it, why does it go to her? Why doesn't it go to the father? My Hari Hein Shalahen, what does it mean it's hers? It just means that it's not the master's. Lafuke de Rabba. And Einachanami, Ataka goes to the father. Mitzias Ishtai, so it says Girsha, if he divorces her, it goes to her. So the Gemara says, well, of course, if he divorces her, it goes to her. Why should it go to him? They're divorced. Pshita. It's talking about where it's a doubt, it's a situation of doubt. What happened was, he threw the get to her, and we're not sure if it's closer to her or closer to him. So it's a suffix get. And the din is that in the case of a suffix get, he still has to support her. So I would think since he still supports her, he should get the lost articles that she finds. Let's see it inside. It's a suffix whether they're divorced. We're not sure whether the get was closer to her or closer to him. The husband still has to support her. Now, since the husband still has to support her, I would think, since he has to support her, that if she finds something, she should turn it over to the husband. So, Taima Mayama Rabbanan Metzia Daf says more no. Why did the Rabbanan say that the Metzia of a woman goes to her husband? So that there shouldn't be enmity, to maintain the peace. There shouldn't be enmity. But here anyway there's enmity. He tried to divorce her. So there's enmity. So there's no need to keep the peace. So therefore there's no need to turn the lost article back to the husband. Now the next Mishnah is in classic Talmudic style. The Mishnah says something, and we don't know what it's talking about until we learn the parameters in the Gemara. That's classic Talmudic style. You have no idea what it's talking about. But of course, it starts with Marshall. All of these messes start with Marshall. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Michal Avram calls them capers. He thinks that you're a type of caper. Ruvain Shannon thinks you're a fruitcake. All these people really like you.
Identify as a fruitcake. I sort of like basic apple cake, but that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. What happens over here is Matzah Shtarei Chayv. I find a promissory note that says that Marshall owes Mark $100,000. The promissory note, Mark is smiling, right? He said, if I would have had such a note, I wouldn't have gone to Colorado. I would have gone to the Swiss Alps. Anyway, so the note says that Marshall owes Mark $100,000. So Matzah Shtarei Chayv. Im yesh behem achrayis nechasim. If it has a security clause, and that means that if Marshall is broke, Mark could collect from people that bought property from Marshall. So im yesh behem achrayis nechasim lo yachzor. I can't return the IOU to Mark. Why? Shebezdin niframehen, because Bezdin will collect from the buyers. Ein b'hem achrayis nechasim, but if it doesn't have a security clause, then yachzor. Why? She'ein Bezdin niframehen, because Bezdin won't be able to collect from the buyers. Divrei Meir. The Chachamim Oimrim, ben kach or ben kach, whether it has a security clause or not, we'll see that the Gemara will tell us tomorrow that achrayis toyis sefer, that even if there is not included a security clause, that's just a mistake of the scribe, and it's assumed automatically, and therefore I can't return it lo yachzor, I can't return it to Mark, because Bezdin will collect from the buyers, and we can't have that. Oh, so now, that's the only question you have? Obviously over here, we're not sure who dropped the shtar. We're not sure if Mark dropped it, or if Marshall already paid the $10,000, and Mark returned the note to Marshall, and Marshall dropped it. And then if I give it to Mark, I'm giving it unfairly to Mark. Now there's two other possibilities. The other possibility is that Marshall wrote up the shtar and never took the loan from Mark. That's also a possibility. There's a third possibility that it's a forgery. I hate to give you a lot of arguments on the side of Marshall, but there's a lot of arguments over here. Now, since that's the case, so what's the difference if there's a security clause or not? Even if it has nothing to do with the buyers. So right away the Gemara, that's what I said, without knowing the background over here, we have no idea what's going on over here. You got to concentrate on this. It says the Gemara, if Marshall admits, yeah, I owe the money to Mark, so then even if there's a security clause, why can't I return it to Mark? Marshall admits that he owes the money. He admits. And if Marshall doesn't admit, even if there's no security clause, why should I return it to him? Even if you can't collect from the buyers, but he could collect for Marshall, and maybe it didn't fall for Mark. Maybe it fell for Marshall. Or maybe Marshall wrote it and never took the loan. Or maybe the whole thing is a forgery. So says the Gemara, okay, we're going to start defining the parameters over here. La'ilam kishechayev maida. Here, Marshall admits he owes the 10,000 to Mark. So Mark is smiling. Give me the shtar. Not so fast. Not so fast. You see, maybe Marshall planned to take the loan in Nisan before Pesach. He wanted to go to a hotel. But at the end, he decided to go to Dubai on Sukkot. And he only took the loan in Tishrei. But this shtar says Nisan. And if we return it to Mark, Mark could collect from buyers 6 months earlier. Because really the loan was first given in Tishrei. And it's predated to Nisan. Says the Gemara, La'ilam kishechayev maida. Marshall admits that he owes the money. But maybe Marshall wrote it to take the loan in Nisan, because he was planning to go away to Pesach in Greece. But Tishrei, he didn't take the loan until Tishrei. So really, the buyers only have a lien. Mark only has a lien on the buyers from Tishrei. But this shtar is predated to Nisan. So returning it to Mark would give him an unfair 6-month lien. So the Gemara says, well, if you're going to worry about that, then worry about it with any shtar. Says the Gemara, and he'll take from the buyers illegally. Says the Gemara, any shtar that comes before us, let's worry that maybe it's predated. Says the Gemara again, we don't worry about this. We worry about only where a shtar that's found in the street. All shtaras do not have a flaw. They're not found in the street. This Hani Reye, this is flawed, and therefore, since this is flawed, we're afraid to return it to Marshall. Of course, he could collect from, we're afraid to return it to Mark. Of course, he could collect from Marshall himself, because Marshall admits he owes him the money. But he can't collect from the buyers because we're afraid maybe it's predated, and therefore he would be collecting, he only has a lien from Tishrei, and he would be collecting from buyers 6 months earlier that he doesn't have a lien on. Now, we're going to continue this discussion, Yetz Hashem, tomorrow.